The White House saying the president is not naive when it comes to Kim Jong-un and will keep maximum pressure on the regime. Let's bring in Chang, columnist for the Daily Beast and author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. What a fascinating moment now to have the French president sitting down with President Trump. A big discussion to be had there. What do you think is first and foremost on their list?
It's got to be the Iran nuclear deal because the president could decertify it under that Corker-Cardin legislation. And I think the president has every right to do that because in that certification, he has to say that the Iranians are not violating the deal. You can't do that because the Iranians are saying you can't inspect our military sites. So I think decertification is the way to go.
But we know that French President Macron is expected to urge him to stay in for lack of better options.
Sure. You can decertify the deal and still stay in, and you can push the Iranians to maybe get out of the deal. There's all sorts of things that the United States can do to push Tehran around, and we haven't really been talking about them. But, you know, this is a technical issue about the ability to inspect Iranian sites because we know that they're up to no good on a lot of stuff.
Let's talk North Korea. There are questions, obviously. I just spoke to Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, as to whether or not we can trust Kim Jong-un in these negotiations. You said that was a crucial question. Why?
Well, you can't trust Kim, but we can sanction him and we can certainly inspect him. You know, the reason why Kim got to the table, why he asked to talk directly with President Trump, was because he needs sanctions relief. And so Trump is the only person in the world who can really give it to them. And also this whole idea about inspections. Previous deals with North Korea failed because we could not verify their promises. So, for instance, the 1994 agreed framework was really great in a sense, but, you know, the North Koreans violated it the moment the ink was dry. So when we look at all of this, it's a question of inspections. And it's the same, both Iran and North Korea. You can't trust them, but you can inspect them.
Here's Defense Secretary Mattis talking about how he's optimistic heading into these talks. Listen.
Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism that the negotiations will be fruitful, and we'll see.
We will see.
Yeah, we certainly will. I mean, this is a question not of Kim. We know Kim is a villain. The real question is whether President Trump will use the elements of American power to disarm North Korea. We can certainly do that with force, but we can also do it without the use of force because it is these coercive measures that we've placed on North Korea. And, you know, we have a lot of things that we can still do to push Kim around. And one of them is to go after his big power sponsors, Russia and China. We haven't really begun to do that yet. And so there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, as they say, so that we can get a good solution, not only for the United States, but also for the international community.
Here's Sarah Sanders at the White House talking about how we are going to, and this administration is going to learn from the mistakes of our country's past when dealing with North Korea. Listen.
Certainly we're not going to make from previous administrations, and we're not going to take the North Koreans simply at their word. Like I said before, and we've said many times before, the maximum pressure campaign is going to continue until we see concrete actions.
So it sounds like you're saying that this administration is on the right track.
Well, it certainly is. You know, there was a lot of complaints about what we were doing in the last year in the Trump administration. But I think the most important thing that the president did, although he didn't often talk about it, was this maximum pressure campaign of putting on unilateral American sanctions and going through the UN and getting the UN to also restrict what North Korea could do. Now, China in the last month or so has been violating UN sanctions openly. And, you know, it doesn't really matter if the talks between Trump and Kim go well. We can ignore it. But if the talks don't go well, then we have to start imposing costs on Chinese banks that have been laundering money for North Korea.
Lastly, with the little bit of time I have left, your expectations for the discussion in the White House today with the French leader and our president when it comes to Syria and leaving a U.S. military presence there. Macron wants it. The president has shown recently that he wants to pull our troops out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure in Washington to keep the troops in. This is one area where I think Trump can make a concession to Macron. But the most important thing is when you heard both talk on the South Lawn, it's just how overwhelming the American relationship with France is. It's our oldest one. And even if you have minor disputes today, they don't really matter much in considering the centuries of relationship.
Fascinating stuff. Gordon.